Hello everyone, my name is Eric and this is my big lubricant factory that I have built in Factorio version 0.17, whatever the version of 0.17 is current on June 30th, 2019. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to jump right into this. It uses one belt of coal and two pipes worth of water, one at the top and one at the bottom, and it uses 10 oil refineries using coal liquefaction to make obviously the petroleum products. The heavy oil is used to make lubricant in 13 chemical plants, and the light oil and petroleum gas that is produced is sent down here to these two tanks, which never fill up. They're just a surge for the volume. And the light oil over here in 8 chemical plants, and the petroleum gas in 2 plants here is converted into fuel blocks. Those fuel blocks are initially sent down this belt where they can be sent to your factory to be used to make rocket fuel or purple science or whatever you're using the fuel blocks for. But once this line gets backed up, this triggers, and then the fuel blocks are sent down along this belt where you can see it has many green wire attached to the conveyor belt, showing it's on read belt and hold. It's just going to read how many fuel blocks are in this line that goes all the way up to here. Now, one thing that's really important when you build this from a blueprint, it screws up and it connects these two power units, this large pole and this substation. You only want them connected using this switch. And then down here in all these rows of radar dishes, it connects them all because they're too close. You could redesign this to make them further apart to where each individual row isn't connected, but you have to go through and manually remove them all using copper wire just like that. You just want to go through. It does take a few minutes. It's a pain in the butt, and I intentionally left these so you can see me doing it, because each row of these radar dishes has to be electrically isolated from one another. And I'll explain why in just a few minutes. So just eyeball it really quickly. You don't want any vertical copper wire anywhere around in any of these radar dishes, and there's a little sign reminding you to do it here. So now that we have our coal in place, the next thing we need to do is connect this whole thing electrically, and this is the only place where you connect it to your main electrical system. So we'll put that right there, and you notice nothing happens at first, and that's just because the switch is forced open because it didn't have any power to begin with. You just built it. So you just bring this power pole right here long enough to get that accumulator started. Once that accumulator gets up to 90%, this switch will reopen, which you will see in just a moment. And it charges all the way. Now this entire factory is electrically isolated. You don't want it connected anywhere else, anywhere in your factory. Just take a quick look around, make sure it's not connected anywhere. So now this entire factory is being powered by these 7 boilers and their associated steam generators. And you can see that they're powering themselves from coal right now, but that will change. And we'll show that in just a moment. And you can see now our refineries are doing nothing because they don't have any heavy oil. They take heavy oil to get started, and I'm in creative mode, so I can make 5 barrels of heavy oil, I should say. And this assumes that you're going to get that from your main petroleum plant elsewhere in your factory. You just drop those 5 barrels in that chest, and it immediately goes into this tank, which feeds down into here. And as all the heavy oil from all these refineries comes up this way, this T-junction right here, if this tank is under 500, it sends whatever's coming up through this pipe to this tank. If it's over 500, it sends it this way, and then it's used by the lubricant plants. And the first thing it does is it refills the 5 barrels, so you have them for later just in case. You can, remove that if you don't want it, but it's there just so you'll have the 5 barrels for safety's sake. And now you can see that each one of these chemical plants is making 10 lube per second, and since there's 13 of them, that's 130 lube per second. It's not quite caught up yet. We don't have quite enough heavy oil. Just give it a couple minutes, it'll be fine. There we go. All right. All of the lube that is being made gets sent into this factory, or this farm I should say, of tanks. And I've got these lights set up here to where it's like a thermometer, goes green, yellow, red to show you how full it is. Right now I just have it set up to where it's dumping into this creative mode thing where it's using an infinity chest to get rid of it all. But that's just so it doesn't get backed up during the demonstration. Let's see how we're doing, if we're caught up yet. There we go. So the last chemical plant in the line making lube oil is running at full speed. Now what's interesting is these chemical plants over here are making fuel blocks, and these fuel blocks are now getting fed down into this system, and you can see that there's 170 some blocks in the system so far. So now these boilers up here have switched over. They're now burning fuel. They're no longer burning coal. And that's because each set of these inserters is programmed based on how much fuel blocks is in the belt. So this first one, if there's 12 fuel blocks, it switches over to using the blue inserter to take from this belt, and it turns off the red one, see, lesser than 12. So if fuel is less than 12, it uses the red inserter, the long handled, to get from the belt that has coal on it. And this one is set at 24, this one's set at 36, and so forth, because the idea is to gradually switch over the boilers as the fuel starts backing up. But now these boilers themselves will never burn off all the fuel that's being produced by those chemical plants making the fuel blocks, and that's why we need these rows of radar dishes. So notice this one's set for 100, this one's set for 120, this one's set for 140, and so forth. As the fuel gets backed up on the belt, it turns these things on. It starts supplying fuel to these boilers, and one boiler makes enough steam for 2 steam engines, which make enough electricity barely for 6 radar dishes. I use radar dishes because they're cheap to make, they don't take up a lot of space, and they use a constant, steady, predictable amount of electricity. I'm not getting backed up. We want these boilers running at full speed, constantly making steam for these steam engines. And as you can see here, these are still shows under power, and that's because this one is programmed for 400, this one was programmed for 380. They increase in 20 with each one. So since there's currently 380 something fuel, 390, it'll get up to there, it's up to 400. So now this one starts up, and you can see these radar dishes start spinning. And as it gets up to 420 and so forth, each additional row will start burning fuel blocks and turning their radar dishes. The last couple of rows aren't used. Usually it doesn't get backed up enough to need those. They're just there for safety's sake. And as you can see, the light oil, it's right at about 200. Petroleum gas is right at 100. These never get backed up. They just kind of, that's just the surge volume, because it's constantly pulling and constantly pushing at different rates into the system. And here it shows we have some lube in our system, and it will run by itself forever. There's some alarms in place in case the coal supply runs low or in case things start to get backed up, but I let this thing run as it is for about 8 hours last night, and it ran no problem. It made thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of units of lubricant and never got backed up. It just constantly runs and will make more than enough lubricant for your blue belt manufacturing if you're building your mega base, or you need it for I guess you'd use it to make electric engines, to make logistic robots and that sort of thing. I hope you enjoyed this. There will be a link in the description where you can find the blueprint on factorioprints.com. Thanks and have a great day.